Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody.
Woohoo!
Welcome to 2023, our first podcast of the new year. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by John Titel, John Stalika, and David Griggs here to spend the next 5.5 hours discussing Rutgers' huge win at Purdue tonight, taking down the number one team.
No spoilers. I have that game DVR'd. I'm just
no other topics for the evening.
Rutgers keeps it close.
We do want to welcome you. Hope everyone had a great new year. And
I was in jail.
Really? You want to tell us
why it was great?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just don't think law enforcement. I mean, they said it was something about public intox, but like, I don't know. If that weren't a law, maybe I wouldn't always be getting arrested.
Let's just get right to the games here and the standings and everything.
You ever think about that?
I'm going to start, of course, in the Big Ten tonight, where we just a few minutes ago saw the game go final. Rutgers wins at Purdue. I was going to start this conference either way because Purdue coming today, one of two undefeated teams left in the nation, number one team in the nation again. And here they are. Rutgers goes in there and takes them down. Before I even get to the list of who wants to discuss about who, Titel, how about my Scarlet Knights tonight?
They were my first team out, and needless to say, they will not be anymore. What I don't understand, Chad, your Scarlet Knights are one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the nation, a little under 31%.
Pull them up.
The best shooter on the team, Cam Spencer, is over 43% this year. How do you let him not even take the shot, but get open to take a shot? Like, let him dunk the ball and go to overtime, right?
It was bad defense by Purdue after following some bad defense by Rutgers the play before, and then a bad turnover in the very last 0.4 of a second left by Rutgers. But, the game at Ohio State, they had the chance to win it and they blew it. They should have won the Seton Hall game, but, this changes the resume. Griggs, this is the road win that they need.
Oh my God.
I mean, sure. They probably need to get a couple more, but you got trips to places like Northwestern and Minnesota left on the schedule here, so there's a chance for a couple more of them still.
Oh yeah, and none of them will be as hard as this one was. And one of the things about this Rutgers team is while it was their first road win, they were right in there at Ohio State. Ohio State really good at home. I don't know if you saw or not. Maryland didn't particularly do well, but Miami, another really good team. Miami's ranked 12th. They were an Elite Eight team this year. I don't know why they were so undervalued, but even after that game, we were all talking, and I think we were all saying how impressed we were with Rutgers and how good they looked in that game. So, while you have some frustrating losses here in the moment, none of them are really bad. The one that they absolutely probably should have won that they didn't was probably the Seton Hall one that you're talking about. But this is a resume-making win. It's one of the best wins, if not the single best win that any team will manage this year. It was just a phenomenal win.
I'm a Rutgers fan, and this doesn't top Alabama winning at Houston. This may not top Houston winning at Virginia, but it's up there.
Yeah, it's big, and I think that it is the difference maker. And no other team within I guarantee you, no one on the 7 line or below will probably have a win like that.
And then we look at the Big Ten standings now. Titel, let me go back to you real quickly because we have 3 2-0 teams. One of them being the Michigan Wolverines now, three-way tie for first place. We forgot about Michigan, didn't we? And maybe we shouldn't keep forgetting about them.
I can't figure them out. So they finished December with a home loss to Central Michigan. Then they start this month by destroying Maryland by 35. They have Penn State coming to town on Wednesday. I thought they might have thrown in the towel after their starting point guard, Jalen Llewellyn, tore his ACL a month ago. But the lesson is always, it's not always a bad thing to lose a guy who began his career at Princeton. So they bring in freshman Doug McDaniel from Washington, D.C., and 5 games as a starting point guard. He's been none too shabby. 9 points, 4 assists, 2 steals a game, coming out of nowhere to just step into the starting lineup.
And Stalika, you being an Ohio guy, how about those Buckeyes? And I'm not talking about the football team, which is still in pain, but think about a nice road win at Northwestern, actually.
Yeah, apparently I heard something went down as far as New Year's Day at midnight, but getting back to actual New Year's Day
very wide left, very wide left.
Yeah. Apparently, when Northwestern loses, they do not mess around. Pitt being one example, and then Ohio State being the other.
I mean, Northwestern, I think, only had about 19 points at halftime, but they were stuck at 13 or 15 for a good chunk of the first half. And Ohio State only caught off the dogs late in that one.
Yeah,
Can we talk about Northwestern for a second? Because
I'll pull them up. I was going to ask you about a different team, but I'll let you talk about Northwestern also.
well,
Here.
I was really big on them and really liking how they were playing and was ready to declare them part of a surprise. They had the win at Michigan State, which at the time we thought was big. The loss at Auburn, that was really close. And, here they are, Ohio State at home, the kind of game where they could sort of make a statement. And they made one, but it wasn't the one that I think I had in mind. They were the 73-57 score is a ridiculously understates just how poorly Northwestern played in that game and how much Ohio State dominated them. But is there anything here?
I think we will find out over the next couple of weeks because there's more than ample opportunity here.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask you about the team I pulled up with there right there, Griggs. Though the Iowa Hawkeyes, after the Eastern Illinois loss, I mean, there's just nothing left here. The team,
Yeah,
it has this team. This team's look like a team that may not win another game this season. The way they're playing right now, they lose to Nebraska. I mean, really
badly.
And
No,
to
you're
Penn
right.
State.
And they went off a cliff. The Iowa State-Iowa game and the Cyhawk game, they dominated that one. And I guess they just celebrated so much that they've been hungover ever since. But they don't even look like the same team. Even when they beat Eastern Illinois, as much of a surprise as it was, and it was, I think we all, or at least I did, thought of it as a likely aberration. But they have stunk. Every time, every minute they've been on the floor since the Cyhawk game ended, and I don't know what the hell happened.
Here's the upcoming schedule of the Big Ten, and we are fully into conference play here at Titel. There's a lot of good games here, including Purdue at Ohio State coming up Thursday night.
Yes, I'm just hoping that Rutgers, when they head back to Jersey Chad's Arena, that they don't have a little drop off because they're feeling too good about themselves.
Well, at least they'll have a home bye game on Sunday against Iowa, the way we're just discussing them. Let's keep rolling things along here. We'll jump over to the Big 12 conference, which is into the start of conference play as well. And Salika, let me come back to you here, where Kansas State, TCU, Texas, and Iowa State all start the season with wins. Maybe the most impressive, Iowa State's win over Baylor, even though it was at home.
Well, that was at home. By the same token, Kansas, I think, was also celebrating a little bit prematurely for New Year's night and ended up sleeping through the first half against Oklahoma State, where they fell behind by 15 points before mounting a comeback in the second half. And Oklahoma State, even though it looked like they got fouled on their final shot, wasn't meant to be against the Jayhawks.
Yeah, the Oklahoma State team here, Griggs, let me pull them up here on the left. You could add in a home win tonight over West Virginia that just went final just as we were started this podcast. So it's not quite on the screen there, but this is a team that when we did a bracket about a week ago here, and they snuck into that bracket based just on metrics.
Well, yeah, it was a metrics bracket. None of us have really been putting them in our fields or been on that big on them since really me in the preseason. And for a second, I thought I was a genius. I was like, well, if they win at Kansas, this is probably their hardest remaining game. And maybe they finally flipped the switch and we're looking at like the team that I thought had a chance to win
but
this
they beat West Virginia tonight. I mean,
they did, but they were at home and West Virginia.
So it doesn't count. Beating the number 15 team in the net doesn't count.
It counts, but did they look like a tournament team to you tonight? I know you're asking me that.
I was watching a different game.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was not watching that game.
I like that win against Sam Houston, maybe even a little more than the win against West Virginia, as far as how they dominated it and how good I think Sam Houston is. I still think this team has a high ceiling, if that's what you're getting at. But they're playing better. The game at home against Texas is probably winnable. If they can get one of the two at either K-State or Baylor, I don't think they've done enough to get inside the bubble yet. None of us have been putting them there, but are they good enough to do what they have to do between now and the end to get there? I think the answer is definitely maybe.
Okay. Anybody that wanted good insight on Oklahoma State, you got none of it because all you got was a big old maybe. But
Yeah.
Titel, their next game now is against the Texas Longhorns. Greg just seemed to say seemed to think that was an easy game. I don't know how even if you're at home beating the number 6 team in the nation, it's going to be an easy game. I think the Longhorns are a pretty darn good team.
They are. I have them as a 3 seed in my first bracket of the year the other day. I still don't know what's going on with suspended coach Chris Beard. To recap, his fiance announced a week ago that he did not strangle her after all. The good news, if there's any, is that his replacement, Rodney Terry, has kept the train on the tracks. He's won 5 in a row. They beat Oklahoma by 1 point on New Year's Eve on the road to get to 12-1. Huge game on Tuesday. They host 12-1 Kansas State. And Marcus Carr, their senior guard, he had back-to-back 9-point games in early December. He has gone nuts in his past 5 games. 23 points a game, 4 assists a game, 2 steals a game. He's made 21 of 34 behind the arc. He's on fire.
When you look at this conference here, the Nets heading into the day today, Oklahoma at 45 is the worst team in the conference. This is just insane. And if you want to know what game to circle for this week, I'll circle them right there. Every single one of them, Griggs. I mean, it's.
Oh, it is.
I can't pick a game that's not going to be a good game when I look at this schedule here.
No, and this isn't the first time we've said this about this league, and it's the perfect 10-team double round robin format, and all the teams are good. Is there a league more fun than this one?
I mean, we could do the rest of the show. We could talk about Kansas, talk about TCU, talk about Baylor coming off that loss actually, but they've got TCU at home this week. Then they got K-State at home. Wow, with this, let's forget. Let's just do the rest of the show about this conference.
Right? Yeah, that Iowa State TCU game, big. Well, yeah, you circled all the big ones. I think you got them.
Let's just put this whole league in. Salika. How about the Big East Conference, your league here? And this was the other game of the week. Your Xavier Musketeers hosting UConn.
Oh, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess you weren't going to be talking about Butler and Georgetown, which, by the way, you can read Titel's lovely column on that game. But getting back to Xavier and UConn, right?
Anyone that thought Georgetown had a shot in that game was very mistaken.
But yeah, getting back to a Xavier UConn right here, this was definitely going to be the irresistible force versus the immovable object right here, given Xavier's offensive proclivity and UConn's top-rated defense right here. And they played even for about the first 36 minutes of the game. And then Danny Hurley happened to commit a few boners on the sideline, the first one being more of a sideline warning. And then there was an offensive foul later on by UConn where he was stalking off the court, pouting before he went to the team huddle. I think all the fans could sense at some point a technical was coming. And sure enough, it came at the free throw line when Xavier was up 2. I think Fremantle was at the line of time. He hits the first free throw. Hurley gets teed up, and then they hit the second free throw plus the technicals in between. So after that, UConn couldn't get any closer than 4 points before they literally called off the dogs, and Xavier knocked him out of the ranks of the unbeaten.
Yeah, and now a trip to Villanova for your next game coming up here. Interesting, a Villanova team that's had a little more life lately, although they did lose to Marquette the other night.
Bit of a surprise.
And strangely enough, I think that's the 3rd time in a row that Marquette's actually beaten Villanova. Don't forget they swept them last year too.
Yeah, I'm going to, and I hate complimenting Stalika's favorite team because I hate doing this for any team, but I think Xavier might be protected seed good. I know that this was a home win. It's not quite the same as winning away from home, but when you look at their 3 losses, all 3 were really close games to really good teams. The one against Indiana, they kind of blew, and I think that they're better now than they were in November when they played those games. So, if they had a shot to do it over, and I know that this is supposing, I think they'd win maybe 1 or 2 of them. This is a team that's playing really well. A lot of what's left on their schedule is games they can win. What do you think? Can they be a protected seed?
Titel, you're the expert.
I had them as a 5 last week. They're looking great. Obviously, 3 tough games coming up before they get a couple cupcakes in DePaul and Georgetown. But if they win 2 of their next 3, I think protected seed, which as everybody knows is top 4 seed, is looking very good.
And Titel, I'm with you. Now tied for first place in the Big East with Xavier is the Providence Friars, a team that I think we were a little bit ready to give up on earlier this season as well, and really starting to play well now.
They finished November with a double-digit loss at TCU. They've won 7 in a row since then, including the 5-point double OT win over Marquette a couple of weeks ago, tied with Xavier atop the Big East standings. Sadly, didn't beat a single team in non-conference play in the top 200 in the nation. More sadly, their next game is against a very angry UConn team, thanks to Xavier, on Wednesday. But it's been Kentucky transfer Bryce Hopkins during this winning streak. 17 points, 11 boards in his past 7 games. He is filling it up.
I'll tell you, looking at this non-conference schedule here, I'm surprised their non-conference schedule is 279. I'm surprised it's not well in the 300s, honestly. I guess the TCU and Miami wins.
Yeah, they did play
gains.
TCU and Miami.
But Griggs, here's the upcoming schedule. I mean, we're really looking at four, maybe 5 teams here. And I say maybe 5 because Creighton has been going in such the wrong direction, kind of had a week off. Now they get a big week here with Seton Hall at home and at UConn. This is their chance for them to bounce back this week, isn't it?
It is. It's easier said than done. They need beating UConn would obviously be nice, and it would completely change the complexion of everything. But they cannot really afford to lose at home to Seton Hall. That's the kind of game. Seton Hall's a good team, but that's the kind of game that a tournament team needs to be able to win. This UConn at Providence game, I'm kind of fascinated by. Because of how well Providence has been playing, at least on the court. They've just been kind of blowing teams out a little bit. So it'll be, and that should be a rabid atmosphere, should be fun.
Tell the truth, Puppet. I think you're happier that UConn is looking up at Providence right now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move over. Let's jump over to the ACC here, and where we've got 3 undefeated teams at Titel. We have Miami, Clemson, and Pitt. And those are not the 3 teams that I would thought were the last 3 undefeated teams of this conference at this point in the season. But I think you want to discuss this Pitt team sitting there, huh?
I mean, you have to remember, this team lost 21 games last year. They started 1-3 this year, but they've won 9 of their past 10. The only lost 1 point on the road. It was at Vandy, so some shame for that. They were down 9 with 11 minutes left last Friday. They rallied to beat North Carolina. They're 3-0 in league play. Congratulations. You get to host Virginia on Tuesday. Good luck with that. And for those of you unfamiliar with the amazing story of Pitt forward Blake Hinson, a quick recap: transferred from Ole Miss to Iowa State in 2020 because in large part of the Confederate symbol on the Mississippi state flag. Didn't play for not 1 but 2 years due to a non-COVID medical condition. Transferred from Iowa State to Pitt. He's become one of the best players in the conference, 17.7 boards a game. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, and look at the top of that profile.
Yeah. Well, you've got 2 tier 2 road wins that are very close to being, sorry, tier 1 road wins are very close to being tier 2 in Pitt. So it's
true, yeah.
A little bit, maybe a little deceptive just because of where those teams are, where those are in the list. But Griggs, North Carolina on the right here, almost trying to build the same profile they had last year. Other than they had the Ohio State win, but which they didn't have last year, but building up those quad 1 losses.
Yeah. And this was a team I mean, we haven't forgotten it because I won't let you all forget it. I would point it out every week. Their first win against the team that was solidly in the field came on March 9th of last year. Now, they still ended up okay, but you're right. They can't beat anyone that's solidly in the field, minus Ohio State.
Speaking of interesting profiles, Stalika, I pulled up Wake Forest on the left here. Is it time to start discuss the Demon Deacons with the Va Tech win they just picked up, on top of the Duke win and the win at Wisconsin?
I have them in that field right here. Getting the Wisconsin win, I think, was the one that really checked off a bunch of boxes for the Deacons right here. Their non-conference strength of schedule was kind of middling right here. So getting that win plus the Duke and Virginia Tech wins are going to help solidify their profile right here. But if we're going to be talking about surprises, it's not Wake Forest. Pull up Clemson's profile, and they're all off to their 3-0 start for the first time since about 5 or 6 years. They had a decent win against NC State at home.
Yeah, I don't see it in Clemson at all.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, I mean,
anyway.
You've got 2 tier 4 losses already, and you're 3-0, but you didn't beat much of anybody yet.
To
in
be fair, I
conference.
don't think their own fans saw it either, because I must have counted maybe 500 people in that Penn State game because of something else going on later that night.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got Virginia, you've got Duke. Virginia picked up a win at Georgia Tech. Duke beat Florida State, so not very notable. Louisville lost their last non-conference game badly to Kentucky. Are they
Louisville,
in this-
the overall average record up to 315.
The upcoming schedule for this week, Griggs. What are we circling here? Is it Wake at North Carolina? Maybe is it Syracuse at Virginia? Is it?
You got a couple litmus
Okay.
tests here. Okay, we're crossing out Syracuse at Louisville, but how about that Virginia Pitt game? We just talked about Pitt. They're at home. I don't know if they have it in them to beat the Who's even at Pitt, but I'm still really looking forward to that when they have a lot of momentum and they're at home. And then Wake in North Carolina and then Clemson when they visit Pitt again on Saturday. So, but yeah, Wake, North Carolina, Virginia, Pitt. Those are the ones I'm kind of looking forward to.
Okay. Let's go. Where do we want to go next? How about Pac-12? Tell us, is your conference here. Maybe not talk about your Arizona team first. I think it's something else you want to discuss here. Utah.
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly thrilled that the Wildcats almost and then didn't choke away a huge halftime lead against the Sun Devils, so they saved the season. I have Utah as an 11 seed. They did lose back-to-back home games to BYU and TCU in mid-December. The cure-all is a Bay Area road trip. They swept it last week. They host the Oregon schools this weekend, and they already have their signature win. They beat my Wildcats in the conference opener by 15, and they're getting it done with defense.
That's not a very good profile.
That was
Top
a
12 in the
profile.
nation shooting percentage allowed from 1-point land and 2-point land and 3-point land. And from the 2-point land, it's been 7-footer Brandon Carlson. Only had 7 points in their OT win in Washington State last month. Past 6 games, he's been hot. 18 points, 7 boards, 3 blocks a game, shooting 61% from the field.
Griggs, Utah's there. Arizona and UCLA, two of the top 10 teams in the nation. I don't think anybody will deny that. Even though UCLA struggled surprisingly a game at Washington State.
USC lost
before they crushed Washington.
Yeah,
but who else do we have? USC, like you said, they lost. Arizona State lost.
Outside of those three, as far as who else we have that can get in the field, I still think it's within reach for Arizona State.
Okay.
Maybe not for anyone else. Oregon been super disappointing. Colorado, outside of the win against Tennessee and Nashville, they've been all over the map.
Colorado lost to Cal on Saturday.
Yes. And that's just a bad loss.
That's
I think
beyond
it's
a bad
worse for
loss.
Stanford because now they're looking up at their neighbors across the bay at Cal.
Yeah,
that won't last long, trust me.
Yeah. Now it gets Louisville back in the hunt for the Stallings. But I did want to say one thing about Washington State, because UCLA struggled there, so did Utah, and USC didn't win there. The committee might want to zero in on the fact that it's hard to win at Wazoo, even though Wazoo isn't very good.
Well, actually, if you look at Washington State here, their net is sitting there at 84. It's a real good net because they played a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 teams. But they got no
there
wins
with
here.
Baylor. I mean, they have nothing to show for it.
Their offensive defensive ratings are both top 100. Those are things that help you become a good metrics team.
Yeah.
Look at these predictive metrics in the 80s here. So that will make beating them impressive actually for the committee.
Yeah, but they almost beat UCLA, they almost beat Utah, they almost beat. I mean, look at those teams. Almost beat UNLV. Like a lot of really good teams. They were right in there with.
They're really good at almost beating people.
They're really good at almost beating people.
Salika, we have USC UCLA this week. Anything else that you're looking forward to?
Probably the only real matchup of note right here. I would like to see Utah at least complete the sweep against the Oregon schools right here. Not something you could take for granted, but if you're going to be a tournament team like the Utes are aspiring to be, you got to win both of these and hold serve.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We haven't discussed them yet, but right now, based on what Rutgers did tonight, we are left with one and only one undefeated team in the entire nation. It is the New Mexico Lobos, Richard Pitino's team. A win over Colorado State, a tough win at Wyoming. And Griggs, nobody wins in Wyoming. Nobody gets higher than Wyoming. At least.
Nobody gets higher than Wyoming. The one thing that kind of jumps off the page here, in addition to the overall record, is the overall strength of schedule. It is a little bit weak. But having said that, like, when you peel this back, there is some good wins there. Like the win at St. Mary's in particular,
There
I
is
thought
a good win there.
was a
Griggs.
decent win.
A good win there.
I think San Francisco on a neutral floor was at least a decent win. But I don't think
San Francisco is not last year's San Francisco team. Team is losing to Texas Arlington. This is not a good Don.
They were for a minute until they lost to Texas Arlington. But I don't even think that they're the best team in this conference. I know that they're the last unbeaten. I certainly think they have it in them to get to the tournament. But I still really like San Jose State. I kind of like UNLV, even though that they've had their share of losses. But there's another team that is in the top of the standings right now that I think is just going to run away with it. And that is San Jose State, 2-0. They're 11. What?
Okay. San Diego State is off to a really good start. Another team, the other 2-0 team, Titel, is Nevada, sitting here 2-0.
So we got Steve Alford getting it done. A roller coaster of a season that keeps going. Started 5-0, lost 3 of 6, won 4 in a row. They do have a couple winnable games coming up: Colorado State and San Jose State. Then a brutal
It's not a winnable game.
Brutal 6-game stretch to finish the month. 2 versus San Diego State and 1 against the last undefeated team in the nation. One reason they've been able to go 6-1 in single-digit games so far: 80% from the free throw line, number 10 in the country. And as far as career roller coasters, not just this season, Jared Lucas, their senior guard. So 2021 at Oregon State, he makes the Elite 8. Last year at Oregon State, he wins 3 games, transfers to Nevada, and just set his career high in scoring on New Year's Eve with 28 in a 6-point win at Air Force. A great story.
Stalika, San Diego State picked up a nice road win at UNLV. This is almost a team that we forgot about when we had the other teams all sitting there undefeated earlier in the season with Utah State and New Mexico and all that. But are the Aztecs going to end up being the best team in this conference at the end of the day?
I think at the end of the day, I'm probably going to go ahead and say yes. Don't forget that the Aztecs also have the win against Ohio State back in the Maui Invitational in November. So it does make the losses against Arizona and Arkansas a little more forgivable by comparison. You wish they could have gotten the win against St. Mary's, but certainly forgivable.
We've got 2 or 3 more conferences left to do. Jump over the American real quick, where Houston got out to a 2-0 lead, now number 1 team in the net, probably be the number 1 team in the nation next week. Again, Griggs wins at Tulsa and over Central Florida this week.
Yeah, and they really had to sweat against Central Florida, and that was a nice win. I'd kind of like to talk about Central Florida if we could.
Okay.
I don't know what else there is to say about Houston other than that they're the best team. They're going to be favored in every game the rest of the way.
Okay, discuss UCF. Here they are. Take a look.
Okay, I really like this team. Now, one of the things that they're lacking in is notable wins, and I hate the term eye test. They go to Houston and they're in the game all the way down to like the last, I think with a minute to go, it was tied, or they were within 1 possession. It took Houston forever to kind of get control of that. They nearly upset Missouri. They had Miami at home, kind of had that game won and blew it. And this is just a case where I feel the team is better than what their resume tops out at by quite a bit. And is there enough to get them there if they can string together wins? Or not? Like, how impressive is this resume?
It may come down to January 25th, what they could do in that second game against Houston.
Yeah.
Because you got to make up for that Asheville loss.
You do. This is a really good team that their profile, in my opinion, doesn't match how good they are. And you're right. Other than Memphis, who I also think is good, and I know that Memphis just lost right when I started praising them. Is there any quality? Is there enough quality here to get them there? Minus, how many strikes do they have?
Yeah, it's tough because Memphis, like I said, they just lost the game at Tulane after they had that nice win over Auburn back earlier in December.
Yeah, and had been playing really well. I mean, nice win for Tulane and Ron Hunter. That happened today. Kind of a bit of a surprise based on how well Memphis had been playing.
Yeah, I think
Um,
Tulane may have been so geeked about yesterday's win that Ron Hunter may have ripped his pants again this afternoon.
uh, uh, Titel, you want to discuss another 2-0 team in this conference? How about the Temple Owls?
Well, Philly Pride, they started 6-7. They had a 20-point loss at the Palestra to my Quakers and a home loss to Maryland Eastern Shore. I was ready to give up. Somehow they bounced back, beat East Carolina and Cincinnati last week. Winnable game on Wednesday at South Florida. Guard Caleb Battle, he's going to turn 22 this summer, but he's only a sophomore because he's only played 18 games combined over the past 2 years due to injury. This year, when healthy, he's been great off the bench. 21 against Villanova, 27 against VCU, and 24 against some team from Piscataway. Maybe their home attendance will actually increase if the Eagles end up as only a 5 seed in the playoffs, Chad.
This upcoming schedule of the American. The games circle out Houston's 2 games, I think. Hosting SMU, who showed a little life out of the Diamond Head, make it to the finals
Yeah,
there.
they did.
And then Houston goes to Cincinnati, which is always a tough place to go to, even if they're
Not if you're Houston.
Jumping over quickly to the West Coast Conference. Gonzaga, a huge win over Eastern Oregon there, and then followed up with a win over Pepperdine. We reached the point in the season where Gonzaga just is going to start piling up those victories, though.
Yes.
At this point. But beyond them, Titel, want to talk a little BYU? Have they put themselves back in discussion at least?
They are in the discussion. They started 5-5. They had a neutral site loss to South Dakota, but they've won 7 in a row. They beat Creighton and Utah. 2 winnable games this week against Loyola Marymount and San Diego, and then Gonzaga comes to Provo on January 12th. I never thought of Mali as like this basketball nation, but they got big men all over this country now. Umar Ballo at Arizona and Fali Dante at Oregon, Adama Sanogo at UConn, and last but certainly not least, Fousseyni Traore at BYU, leading the conference this year in offensive rebounding.
There we go. Stalika, the Gales I've got there on the right. This team does have a pair of quad 3 losses now, but certainly should have a chance to pick up a lot of wins in conference.
Well, if you look at what they did this weekend, they had to hold on for dear life against Santa Clara. That was a game I thought they had in the bag about midway through the second half before the Broncos ended up making a comeback of their own. But at least a win is a win for the Gales right here.
Right. And if we look at the upcoming schedule here in the West Coast Conference, we've got Gonzaga at San Francisco. Griggs, I know you love the San Francisco team.
Well, they're off to a bit of a rough start in conference, but for every team that I point out is someone that I think's doing well. Last week it was Memphis and San Francisco. They go on to have a bad week.
Joby would require a waiver for San Francisco now because they lost to a Steve Lavin coach team.
Yeah.
We have not yet discussed the SEC. It really hasn't gotten truly going into conference play yet, although we did see LSU Griggs start off the season with a win last week over Arkansas.
And that was
there.
Yeah, LSU, they've kind of snuck. I don't know, how does a 12-1 team from the SEC sneak up on you? But LSU, at least with me, kind of has. I was sort of passively watching them, not paying that close attention, and then they go out and beat Arkansas, and it was a real good win. And you look at them here, and Arkansas, Wake, I kind of like the Akron team a little bit.
And you got
one loss to K-State was a very close game.
You got to
love. They've gone to the pastry cart, but
340. Look at this. Look at these tier 4 home games.
Yeah, and that is a problem. Like, that is a hosted, the non-conference strength is 340. Well done. That's hard to do.
The other team up there at the top, Titel. How about Missouri picking up the win over Kentucky this week?
So I had them as a 9 seed last week. I'm pretty sure I'm going to move them up next week. And you guys know how I love first-year coaches, but Dennis Gates, he's been near perfect so far. 12-1 on record. His only loss is to the defending champs, something called the boundary skirmish or something like that. Since that loss, a trio of top 50 wins. UCF by 2, Illinois by 22, and Kentucky by 14. Huge road test on Wednesday at Arkansas. They're getting it done inside on the offensive end. 61% from 2-point range is number 2 in the nation, and scoring in general, 89 points a game is number 3 in the nation. And there's a lot of good college players these days named Kobe, but Kobe Brown, I think, is one of the best. 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists a game. He's made 9 of 15 from behind the arc this year, but he's not some little point guard. 9 of 15 in his past 3 games. He's 6'8", 250, and he's drilling threes.
Missouri
So-
did do a pretty good job playing tier 4 teams at home well this year, though. You can't overlook that.
you kind of hate to see this out of anybody. Stalika's comment here: LSU smells like a meth lab.
I don't even know. Griggs, Kentucky fans are panicking the end of the world
Yes,
now
yes.
after this loss. They now have 3 tier 1A losses. It's the end of the world.
Yeah, well, their best win is probably
Yeah.
Michigan. Their best win in this country is probably either Yale or Duquesne. I understand that being a source of frustration, but I still can't help but think that they're going to bounce back and get the wins that they need between now and the end, and when they get the momentum going. Yeah,
I look at their offensive and defensive rating, 17 and 30. Look at the BPI 13, the Ken Palmer 14. This is just a team that the way the schedule is played out, the close losses, maybe a couple not so close losses,
Yeah.
but I think this team is going to rebound and be fine at the end of the day. I just don't think it's time to panic for Kentucky.
Yeah, and I don't know. Kentucky always panics, but if the same people that are panicking now will be saying "I told you so" if Kentucky turns it around.
I have a couple other teams here. Alabama and Tennessee both start off with road wins, Stalika.
Alabama, I think, is going to be the bigger one, given that they were able to get a win in Mississippi State, which is the first time the Bulldogs have lost at home this year. And Mississippi State in a little bit of a skid themselves when you add the Drake loss to there. If we're looking at Tennessee, they're surviving at Ole Miss, but any road win is going to be gold in the SEC this year.
I agree with you there. Upcoming schedule. We've got a lot of big games here, starting with tomorrow night, LSU at Kentucky. We got we've got Missouri at Arkansas. We got Kentucky at Alabama coming up on Saturday, Arkansas at Auburn on Saturday. We can just keep running down these. And but Titel, how about coming up next Monday night, Georgia and TCU, non-conference action?
I've got Georgia and the points, but I'm telling you, there's a reason TCU's undefeated. This is one of those special teams. So if Georgia plays their A game, then Kirby Smart will have back-to-back titles. But if they do not play their A game, keep an eye on it.
I can't cheer for my arch rival right here. So go Frogs.
Yeah. The Xavier Georgia rivalry. Wow.
Griggs, anything else in the upcoming schedule out you on the basketball court?
I think you pretty much hit on all the big ones. Georgia, Florida, a little cocktail party action. 2 teams that have a lot of work to do before we have anything to say about either
Georgia,
one. Georgia,
sitting there at 10-3 now, bad 10-3 with a 3:30 start of the schedule, but picking up wins at least.
Mm-hmm.
Normally around this time of night, we'd go and discuss the Atlantic 10. We don't discuss them anymore on the show. If you're here to talk about Atlantic 10, tune in Wednesday night. They've been relegated out of this show.
Yeah.
However, there is one other team we will be discussing tonight. Welcome to the AP Top 25, College of Charleston at 14-1. I'm going to pull them up here, Griggs, a little under the radar school, now ranked at least in one of the 2 polls.
Yep.
Based on a very impressive record, and the game in North Carolina that was a lot closer to that final score.
An impressive record and a good team that's probably worthy of that ranking. They've been floating around. It seems like they've been hovering between 28 and 26 for 5-6 weeks now, finally getting into the poll. There is a little debate. I think that we're all voting this team at or near the top, but there's some other really good under the radar teams too. If you want to tune in Wednesday night, Florida Atlantic one, Sam Houston, I think, is another one. But here they are. And one of my biggest questions about them was, they have some impressive brand name wins, but they got all of them at home. And how good are these teams actually going to turn out to be? Kent State has turned out to be fantastic. That's another team that we really like. So I think I think that's going to help out their metrics. And they wanted Townsend. Now I know Townsend's way down there in tier 3, but this is a really talented Townsend team that typically plays well at home. And I think at the end of the year, they're going to get quite a bit of credit for that. And you look at their remaining schedule and you got to think that the hardest games are behind them. And I don't think they'll win them all, but I think they'll be favored in every single one of them. And where does this team go if they, only lose one or two the rest of the way?
Well, let me throw this question out over here to Tytel, because when you say you're the 23rd best team in the nation, that means you're a 6 seed or a 7 seed. Do you think that this Charleston team, if you're building back right now, is in that range? Or because I don't think they really are, but maybe you think they are.
No, I have them as a 12. And if I
Okay.
was a 5 seed, I would be terrified because I do not want to play this team.
Okay.
I think we have to look at it kind of like working backwards. So they're 14-1. They got 16 regular season games left. So if they go 30-1 and then get upset in the conference tourney, I think we can all agree they're making the tournament as an at-large. My
Absolutely.
question is, if you drop the game on January 11th at UNCW, their only top 100 team left, and you go 29-2 and then stump your toe, I think you're still making it 2. I don't know if they go 25-6 with a bunch of losses. I don't think that's going to cut it though.
Yeah,
25-6, probably not. But keep in
25
mind,
I would say even 26-5, because all 5 of your losses, at least 4 of those 5 losses, are going to be tier 3, tier 4 losses. You just don't have an opportunity to lose games, because every game right now is one you're going to be favored to win by a lot.
you're right. You're right about that too, Chad. And the other thing is that if they lose 4 or 5, they're probably not the first place team. And I just can't see the committee swallowing that. I do want to point out that Murray State last year was in a league that was not as good as this one and finished 29-2 and was on the 7 line. And that to me indicates that they had another strike or two in them. Maybe not 4, but they could have dropped another game or 2 and still been selected.
I'm not that confident in the strength of this league. There are 2 more decent teams in Towson and Wilmington, and there's a lot of garbage here, especially with the additions this year of the North Carolina A&Ts and the Hamptons and Elon being down and Monmouth being pathetically down. There's a lot of bad in this conference this year.
A lot of bad in the OVC last year.
Let's go over to some final thoughts. And Tytel, I'm going to start with you because I got the screen share up.
So we got Stephen Ashworth here. And if you look at him, you probably think he's some skinny high school kid, but he's actually a junior guard, and he's arguably the best player in the Mountain West. Last year, he only started half of his team's games, scored 9 points a game in 27 minutes, shot about 40% from the field. Very mediocre. This year, he's only starting half of his team's games. He's not like a starter playing 38 minutes a game, but he's scoring 17 points in only 30 minutes a game. He's shooting 54% from the field, leading the nation 54% from behind the arc. The team's 12-2, only a pair of 3-point losses last month. I got to interview him a couple of years ago when he made the tournament as a freshman. It's so fun to see these guys go from role players into stars. And I hope that Stephen Ashworth keeps kicking some ash.
Stalika.
I'm going to go with a historical footnote as far as Charleston goes. You have to, I think, go back to 1997, the last time I could remember them being ranked. And this is when they were the College of Charleston and dominating what was then the Trans-America Athletic Conference, now the Atlantic Sun. They were ranked for a good chunk of that year, ended up getting a 12 seed in the NCAA. The unlucky team that faced them in the first round was a Maryland team that was top 10 for the first half of the ACC season before teams eventually figured them out. They beat Maryland in the first round, and as Tytel will probably remind us, Arizona was a team that eventually knocked out Charleston en route to their national title season.
Good point. Griggs.
Let's see. It's just sort of hard to believe that the season is already half over. This is week 9 of the 18. Geez, it flies by. The one thing that sticks out to me is a lot of the SEC teams, particularly LSU, Missouri, but others as well, that have bloated records against pastry cart schedules. And while they haven't positioned themselves to where making the field or landing inside the bubble is out of reach, they really haven't done them that much to help themselves either, and they still have a lot of weight to lift between now and the end. So that will add some stakes to the SEC games the rest of the way, I think.
Yeah, and we are fully on into conference play now. This is, this is really is the second season after the non-conference play, and it's a ton of fun. We saw what's coming up, for example, this week at the Big 12. It's insane, but
Yeah.
but there are tons of games ahead. We will be back Wednesday night with Under the Radar. We might be doing a bracket rundown this week. Next week, we haven't figured that out yet. We might have 2 more podcasts this week. We'll let you know.
Yeah. We'll probably be doing it. So
on behalf of John Titel, John Sleek, and David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.